Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Janice Whitaker, and it's my pleasure to serve as the CGNE Administrator and Education Program Manager. I also host the CGNE seminars and are very thankful that Jenny Rank provides a lot of technical support as well as working with the speakers as well. This program is provided by the Teresa Neese and Helen Diskovich Center of Geriatric Nursing Excellence at the Penn State Ross and Carol Neese College of Nursing. In collaboration with the Office of Outreach and Professional Development, the Center for Nursing Research, and Age-Friendly Care Pennsylvania. Today's seminar is entitled AI and ChatGPT in Delirium and Caregiver Research, and it will be presented by Dr. Young Choi, Assistant Professor in the Department of Health Information Management, School of Health and Rehabilitation Science at the University of Pittsburgh. Before we begin the presentation, we do have some disclosures and announcements to make. Penn State Ross and Carol Neese College of Nursing is approved as a provider of nursing continuing professional development by Pennsylvania State Nurses Association, an accredited approver by the American Nurses Credentialing Centers Commission on Accreditation. Participants with a valid RN license who attend the entire Nursing Continuing Professional Development program can earn 1 contact hour. Partial contact hours are not awarded. The topic of this education is non-clinical, and therefore we did not identify, mitigate, or disclose relevant financial relationships. Please be aware that the seminar is being recorded, and if you'd like to watch any of the recorded seminars, we do put them up on our YouTube channel. If you have any comments or questions for our speaker, you can ask them a couple different ways. You can enter that into the chat, or if you want to use the raise hand feature, Jenny will be monitoring that and she will be happy to unmute you so you can speak aloud. The post-event evaluation survey, the link for that will show up in your browser when the webinar concludes. It will also be emailed to you within 24 hours. This is required to be completed by RNs seeking contact hours, but we do ask that all attendees complete the post-event evaluation to assist with data collection and give us feedback on the seminar. So thank you in advance for doing that. And to earn contact hours, we do record attendance with Zoom in and out times. Again, the evaluation is required, and any nurses meeting the requirement for professional development contact hours will receive a certificate within 1 month of the seminar. If you have any questions, you're always welcome to reach out to us at cgne@psu.edu. Next, I'd like to introduce Nahida Akhtar, an amazing PhD student that is very engaged with our center. To gain knowledge that will enhance the research that she's working on, Nahida is currently doing some shadowing at 2 of our favorite collaborative partner organizations in State College, Juniper Village at Brookline and Foxdale Village. This is providing Nahida with some meaningful opportunities to observe care and quality of life for residents in the long-term care settings, especially as it relates to person-centered and preference-based care. So we welcome Nahida and thank her for introducing today's speaker.
Thank you so much, Janice. Dr. Young Choi, PhD MPAs, is an assistant professor in the Department of Health Information Management at the University of Pittsburgh School of Health and Rehabilitation Science, with interdisciplinary training in computer science, public health, and biomedical and health informatics. Dr. Choi's research focuses on developing and evaluating digital health technologies that support older adults and their family caregivers. He is dedicated to involving individuals and families in the design, development, and evaluation of technology tools in his research. His current research explores the use of artificial intelligence and smart home technologies to enhance care for individuals with Alzheimer's disease and related dementia, and to improve the quality of life for both patients and care partners. I'm so excited for his presentation. So please welcome Dr. Choi. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this wonderful presentation opportunity. So I'll go ahead and share my screen now. All right. Okay, I think everybody can see the screen. So thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, Nahida. So I am coming from the intersection of computer science, public health, and health informatics. So some of the discussion today can be involving a little bit of technical details, but I would really love to have a conversation about how the clinical application of this can be based on what you see. And I prepared a lot of demo slide to aid our discussion today. I have no financial interest or relationships to disclose regarding this presentation. So starting off with just looking back in this open AI or generative AI, ChatGPT, it's hard not to go by a day, without hearing or listening to new AI stuff, here and there in the research world, in the commercial space. But it really is pretty recent if you think about it. It is November of 2022 when OpenAI came out with their GPT model that everybody could have access to and start exploring the application of ChatGPT. And I'll talk more about that, but just to provide a little bit of background context of my research. So we know that the number of family caregivers here in the United States are increasing, and more people are stepping into the role of caregiver, especially for loved ones with complex conditions like dementia. So in fact, in 2020, approximately about 53 million adults, about 1 in 5 people, were family caregivers. And this number is expected to keep growing rapidly over the next 30 years. And with family caregiving, unlike professional caregiving, most family caregivers don't receive formal training, and they're often thrown into this caregiving role unexpectedly without the skills or knowledge to manage the complexities of care that they have to provide. And as you can imagine, this leads to feelings of stress, overwhelm, and uncertainty. And the previous research has shown that caregiving takes a great toll, not only on the caregiver's physical and mental health, but also on the family relationships and their ability to participate in social and work activities as well. So there's clearly a need to better equip caregivers, family caregivers, with the right tools and knowledge so that they can provide effective care and feel more confident in their roles. So my research perspective is thinking about how we can use different technology solutions to provide this support to family caregivers. And as I'm a technology enthusiast, as I am keep tracking what's up and coming in the technology that we can use, this generative AI was the most shocking or revolutionary advancement that we saw in the past couple of years. And as some of you can possibly be using it daily already, it really has transformed the way that we work, the way that we consume information, the way that we generate information. All of that has changed with this introduction of generative AI tool. And my focus is really to understand how we can use this tool, generative AI, in an effective manner that we can support the family caregiving, and it also aid older adults in their aging in place. So that's my overarching goal and premise leading into this presentation. So giving a little bit about the background on the generative AI. So at its core, generative AI is a type of AI that doesn't just analyze data. So when we think about like the term like machine learning, AI, often you would associate that with like deep learning, like going deep, going into the data, finding some patterns to analyze the data. But generative AI is a type of AI that doesn't just analyze the data, but it has the capacity to create new content. So it can write text, it can generate images, it can even compose music and even assist in complex problem solving, all based on patterns it has learned from massive amounts of data. So taking ChatGPT as an example, um, as many of you possibly have not only used ChatGPT, but maybe Gemini on the Google side, these tools can answer questions in a way that feels conversational and human-like. And all of this is powered by something called a large language model. And these large language models are trained, again, on an enormous amount of text available on the internet, like any type of information that you are able to access on the internet, whether that is a book, information, discussion board, all of it has been used to train these large language model. And we can talk about the ethics of that later in the discussion part, but just know that this was done to create this massive training data set to power this large language model. So over time, these large language models have become really good at predicting what comes next in a sentence, allowing them to generate like full responses, essays, or even stories. And that's how we now have this ChatGPT or any type of generative AI service. So in the simplest sense, here's how it works. So there is this user prompt, which is you asking a question or giving the model, the large language model, some context. So for example, you could ask, like, what are the symptoms of dementia? And the large language model then processes your question and generates a response based on everything it has learned. So it might say, some common symptoms of dementia include memory loss, confusion, and difficulty with language, and so and so and so forth. So the general structure of this is you asking question as a user. That's what we call the prompt. So the prompt is your question, and the output is the model giving you the answer based on what it knows based on the training data. So knowing that, there are many things that large language models can do and can help the task that you want to do. So in a sense, it can help you aid in the searching. So you can search the web now. You can, when you go onto Google and do some searching, it usually adds an AI search result up on top. So that's one way that it can add additional context information to the search that you want to perform. But not only that, it can do language translation. It can also do summarization of the content that you provide. It can cluster the information on to the themes that they see on the patterns of the text. And it can obviously create text based on the prompt. There are issues with hallucination, which we're going to talk about. So hallucination is AI creating, false information, seemingly plausible information. When you read, it seems real, it seems factual, but if you dig deeper into it, it's not really true at all. So these are what we call hallucinations that generative AI do to create a plausible answer, but it's actually false. So those are the limitations of generative AI, and there are some techniques that's involved in using this type of generative AI tool. One is what we call a prompt engineering. So prompt engineering is essentially the art of asking the right questions or giving the right instructions to an AI so it gives you the best, most useful answer. So think of it like talking to someone who has access to a massive library of knowledge, which is the language model. What you get back depends on how clearly you ask your questions. So for example, if you just ask ChatGPT, tell me about family caregiving, you might get a very broad answer, more of a generic answer. But if you ask, what are some practical tips for managing daily routine of a person with dementia, as detailed your instruction it gets, you will get a much more focused, helpful response. And you can also introduce a prompt like display in a tabular format, or create an image that would create a diagram based on the generated text. And it would continue to provide additional ways that it can generate the text, or it can generate the content that's more relevant and specific to your needs. So that's the prompt engineering, for you to develop such ways of asking questions to the large language model so that it can give you the best relevant and specific responses. So with that as a background, I'm going to go into some of the demos, especially as today's topic is introducing this AI solutions to Delirium and caregiving research. One of the aspects that I also delved into was the education aspect. I know many of you are also nursing students, medical students, or clinical clinicians who are actually practicing at this time. So these are some ways that I prepare. So you can actually go ahead and type this link to follow through yourself, or you can just see me just go through the slides together. So when I had this question about what would be the best use cases for ChatGPT or generative AI in delirium education, as part of my presentation that was given to ADS, American Delirium Society, back in June, I wanted to ask ChatGPT first, and see what are the ways that ChatGPT itself can think about the role of generative language models in this area. So you can see whenever you ask these type of questions, it does provide a pretty thoughtful answer. So you can see content creation, simulation and training, interactive learning platforms, personalized learning resources, multimodal communication, research and knowledge synthesis. So some of you might agree or disagree in the way that it's generating these content for you. But today I'm just trying to show you how you can dive deeper into these different tasks that you can do. So here I am giving additional prompts. So to illustrate the point that you generated, I asked, please simulate a patient with delirium. What symptoms would they present with? So these are the responses that it generates. So let's create a simulated patient scenario. And it's starting to prompt the simulated patient scenario named Mr. John Smith. And I'm going to give you a full picture on this screen. So John Smith, 72-year-old male, admitted to the hospital for scheduled knee replacement surgery. All of this is just ChatGPT creating. I didn't give any of the prior context, which I could, but in this here, I didn't provide any of the clinical context, but it's just generating it based on what it knows, what it can. And the format it takes is background, presenting complaints, symptoms of delirium. So here, this is what makes it important for this case, because I wanted to see a patient scenario with delirium symptoms. So one, altered mental status, attention and concentration impairment, fluctuating level of consciousness, disorganized thinking, perceptual disturbances, and there are some additional details which it provides, like the physical examination results. So if you're familiar with delirium or how to assess delirium symptoms, some of these wording like disorganized thinking, fluctuating level of consciousness, this all resonates. So it does seem like ChatGPT is able to understand the context of delirium based on the training that it has been done on. But additionally, here are some of the other ways that I asked. So please demonstrate how you can create education materials to help healthcare professionals understand the complexities of delirium. Please generate additional resources or exercises to help a medical student to understand the concept of delirium. And then it's trying to create this educational material for, in this case, medical student. So understanding delirium, introduction to delirium, and it's providing clinical presentation assessment, differential diagnosis, management strategy. So it is producing all of these different ways or suggesting different ways that can also create educational material. One more thing that I wanted to show is like generating this interactive patient simulation. And I wanted to have ChatGPT focus on delirium superimposed on dementia, as that's also one of my research area currently. So it's generating this patient simulation scenario on this Mr. Johnson, in this case of delirium superimposed on dementia. So there is this scenario that's presented, and it's also giving some of the simulation objectives. So it's generating a lot more content than this, but we don't have time to go through all that. But you can actually just do this on your own at a later time, following the prompt, the link to the prompt that I provided. So at the end, I actually asked the ChatGPT to start the simulation, and it does. Welcome to the interactive patient simulation featuring Mr. Johnson, and then it's providing this guided scenario on how that simulation can occur based Mr. Johnson as a patient and you as a clinician. And after that exchange, as you process with the assessment, Mr. Johnson's symptoms become more evident, and it's generating more simulation based on the assessment that it can do. Additional ways that can be used, generating a quiz question for students to identify symptoms of delirium. So you can also generate some educational guidance materials as well. So some of you faculty members might actually be generating some of these questions that way. And here, so read each scenario carefully, select the option that best describes the symptoms of delirium presented in the scenario. Scenario 1, question is also scenario is presented and the question follows with the options. Scenario 2, question. So in the same way, so just presenting you how these generative AI tools can be used for education, and not only actually for clinician education, but this can also be used for family caregivers, and that's where I am headed next. But in this case, I wanted to also create more detailed case vignette of a person with dementia or a person with delirium symptoms in a community setting, as often delirium is assessed well in the hospital setting, in the clinical setting, but with the family caregivers, they often have trouble recognizing the difference between dementia versus delirium, and that's a case which I wanted to dig deeper in. So I wanted to see how ChatGPT can generate such cases. So generating case vignette involving a patient with delirium symptoms in a community setting, and I am giving actually more specific prompts in this case. So with a focus on interactions between the patient and their family caregiver, this vignette should include details about the patient's background, symptoms of delirium, caregivers' observations and concerns, and any challenges that they face in managing the patient's condition outside of a hospital or clinical setting. And surprisingly, it does follow this well. And I am comparing these type of chat AI generated clinical vignette with the focus groups that we are conducting in our research. And we're actually improving also what AI can generate, or providing additional context to AI based on what we learned from the focus group to create this polished case vignette in a quick and efficient way. So you can see case vignette, the patient background, current symptoms of delirium, caregivers' observations and concerns are presented, and also challenges in managing the patient's condition. I know it's a lot to maybe for you to read at this time, but just follow along with the way that it can be used for these tasks. So I'm going to transition to the current research and also the paper that we have written based off of this interest of ChatGPT in delirium assessment, especially in the community setting. So I am currently conducting a pilot study with Dr. Sheen Lin at New York University. This work is actually focused on using mobile health applications to help support family caregivers to detect delirium symptoms at home, and also guiding them to better manage the delirium symptoms currently. So this work is actually just focusing on the use of mobile applications. So we have designed a delirium component in an existing mobile application that was originally designed for clinicians to use to assess delirium symptoms, but we have adapted this existing app to modify it. We co-designed it with family caregivers to design a component for family caregivers so that they can use it to conduct the assessment on their own using this guidance by the mobile application. So for this, we used a family confusion assessment method for family caregivers. So FamCam assessment was adopted for this work. But from this, what we understood was that family caregivers, with the focus groups that we did, they still need additional, they wanted a interaction more than just a mobile application. Often that they had some questions about how to assess well, they had some questions along, following the questions, or I'm not really sure how to answer this. And so there were some difficulties also, even with providing education to them prior to the intervention. Many of the family caregivers also had some trouble understanding. And when we were in the design session, they thought of maybe some of these AI tools can be used for helping them to do the assessment on their own. So that led us to do this kind of a mini study, kind of spin-off project on our mobile health work. So understanding how possibly ChatGPT can be used for delirium assessment. And we wrote this work with also Dr. Donna Marie Fick, who is here with you, with your school. And we wanted to see how ChatGPT can be used to actually assess and report the delirium assessment result, and how that could actually possibly be used by family caregivers. So to conduct this work, we chose the SOUR-7 assessment, which is a 7-item assessment question that was designed for in the family caregivers to use. So it was SOUR-7 was created not for the clinicians to use, but it was designed to be used by the family caregivers. So what we wanted to do was to see whether this AI model like ChatGPT can understand and apply the SOUR-7 questionnaire on validated clinical vignettes. And we wanted to also design this prompt. So we wanted to conduct a little bit of prompt engineering to see how we can best optimize this result. So there were some iteration that we did in creating these prompts. And then we wanted to really see the comparison of AI performance with human experts. So we asked several of the clinicians who were the co-authors of this paper who are clinicians, MDs and RNs and NPs. So we asked them to rate the same clinical vignette using the SOUR-7 questionnaire, and we compared that with the AI performance. And our goal was to evaluate the accuracy and effectiveness of ChatGPT models in a clinical context. So in this clinical vignette versus human experts. So first and foremost, we wanted to see whether ChatGPT does actually have the baseline knowledge of like SOUR-7 questionnaire. If it doesn't even know like SOUR-7 assessment question or how to conduct it, this is all going to fail. So what we did was first assessing the baseline knowledge of the ChatGPT models. So that is me asking to ChatGPT, what is the SOUR-7 questionnaire for delirium assessment? And as you can see, as of my last update in September 2021, there's no specific assessment tool called SOUR-7 questionnaire for delirium assessment that I am aware of. So it's not recognizing the SOUR-7 assessment tool, but it is actually able to point you to different tools that it knows about. So like CAM, CAM-ICU, Delirium rating scale. So if you are Delirium researcher, you will recognize these are actually the relevant one. It doesn't talk about all the things, but it does point you to some of the tools that maybe it knows about. Another thing, so I asked questions differently. What are the Sour 7 questionnaire items and how do you score them? Again, in the same way, it doesn't have knowledge on this assessment question. So I asked it a different time, like with most. Now this is showing you a most recent like responses. Some of the earlier responses were these two pictures. When I ask it now, it is actually able to provide some information. The Sour 7 questionnaire is a tool used for delirium assessment in clinical setting. So it seems right. So I keep reading on, and it says the questions are, what is your name? What is the date of today? What month is it? Can you tell me where you are right now? So these are actually not Sour 7 question items. So this is an example of hallucination. So it is generating some content. So if you are someone without domain knowledge, you might think that this is actually the right one. But upon further investigation, you know that this is not correct. So this is the case of hallucinating. So hallucination by this AI models. So what we then wanted to do is, we knew that ChatGPT doesn't have this awareness or the knowledge, correct knowledge of the Sour 7 assessment. So we wanted to teach the AI model. So we wanted to use these prompts to do context-specific training, meaning that teaching ChatGPT to understand what is Sour 7 correctly. So that's what we did next. So I'm going to transition my screen to the table that we have here. So I'm going to try to make this a little larger. This is showing the same step 1, assessment of baseline knowledge of ChatGPT 3.5. We also conducted this with ChatGPT 4 as well. When at the time of conducting this study, ChatGPT 4.0, the most recent version was not out, so we didn't include that. So this second step is this context-specific training and preliminary validation. So what we did was we actually fed in the research article describing the Sour 7 instrument. So the original creator of the Sour 7 assessment was or one of the co-authors of this paper. And we provided ChatGPT this full text of the validation study that the Dr. Schulman and his team conducted. So we fed this data sequentially and also designed a prompt to see whether it actually understood this research article. So after all that and a couple iterations of it, you can see like here's the next block. So I'm providing block of text each time. So this part repeats until all the text block has been fed to the ChatGPT. And then I am able to ask, actually, I am also designing the prompt to train the scoring methodology derived from the Sour 7 assessment. And this was included as an appendix to the original article. And I modified it and input it in this way. So if yes to alter level of awareness to the environment in any way different than being normally awake, score of 3. If no, 0. So I'm designing the prompt in a way that ChatGPT can understand the scoring methodology. So after all that, when I ask this validation question, what is the Sour 7 questionnaire for delirium assessment? Then it is then now able to provide a correct response. So Sour 7 questionnaire assigned weighted scores to the responses of its 7 questions, with questions 1 to 4 having the highest weights, questions 5 to 7, and it's providing the correct information. So one here is I am also asking this validation question. What are the Sour 7 questionnaire items and how do you score them? Now it's also able to provide a correct scoring criteria as follows. So you can see all the 7 question items and how it should be scored. Same thing with ChatGPT 3.5. I'm asking the validation question and it is able to generate this block of text, and in a way it is correctly generating how this should be used, how Sour 7 should be used and calculated on the responses that's provided. So with that, our next part was this pilot evaluation. So to do this evaluation, what we used was to use a previously validated clinical vignette. So this was actually also done by the research team of Dr. Fick previously on this clinical vignettes that describes 5 different cases of delirium. So with that 5 scenarios or clinical vignette, we are we're creating this prompt to do the evaluation. So I'm asking ChatGPT, here's a scenario. Please evaluate using Sour 7 questionnaire items and provide the scoring breakdown. So, and then I'm attaching this block of text, which is the validated clinical vignette. And then the responses are as follows. So let's evaluate the scenario using Sour 7 questionnaire items and provide the scoring breakdown. So you can see that it is actually able to pinpoint where the point of the sentence where it is actually drawing the inference to the score. The reason, the placement of which sentences it's using to drive this result of reduced attentiveness, or like fluctuation in awareness and attentiveness as well. It's able to do that and then also provide this total score. And based on the original assessment item, which is guiding this assessment, if the score is 9 or above, indicates delirium. So in this case, it's indicating potential delirium, and this is a correct assessment. So this is like the way that we are doing this evaluation. And with that, what we are doing is we then wanted to compare this to the human experts. So to do this, to compare the result of human experts to ChatGPT, we knew from our iteration that we had to introduce a further prompt refinement. So this is how we're now asking ChatGPT. So we numbered the sentences of the original vignette. So we're asking, here's a scenario. The sentences are numbered for your reference. So now we are actually numbering the sentences, and we're asking ChatGPT to evaluate using Sour 7 questionnaire items and provide the scoring breakdown and reasoning. So this is us further refining all the prompts that we're using for evaluation. And for each observation, please specify the sentence numbers that informed your decision. And we ask the same thing for human evaluators as well, so that we can know how the inference might be similar or not. So where human experts are drawing their conclusion to provide the scoring for each item, and wanting to compare that with ChatGPT AI model as well. So this is just an example based on the provided scenario and number of sentences. Here's the evaluation using the Sour 7 questionnaire. And it's doing the assessment, and now it's also providing the sentence number as well. Like sentence 7 describes Charles pacing, waving his arms and mumbling to himself, indicating altered level of awareness. And it's doing the same thing for other items as well. Sentence 9 states that it was difficult to gain Charles' attention and he was not able to engage in a sensible conversation, suggesting reduced attentiveness. So it's doing all this so that we can actually compare this item by item, sentence by sentence, to see how this actually compares to human experts. Same way, we are doing this to the ChatGPT 4 as well. And summing up the point, and gets total score of 15, which suggests a high likelihood of delirium. So this was the way for our comparative analysis. Finally, we also wanted to optimize the prompt further to create the result format that we desire. So what we ended up was, first, we wanted to provide, because we found a couple problems with the previous iteration. Sometimes it's not really able to provide correct scoring in small number of cases. So we wanted to, again, more specifically say how this should be scored. So example is this part. Only a definitive yes or no response is accepted for each item. No intermediate or partially affirmative responses are accepted. This was done because in some cases where the scoring was between 0 to 1, it was binary choice of either giving 1 or 0. AI sometimes gave 0.5 because it was a little bit unclear to the AI model on what number to give. So we removed such cases by adding this additional part. Only a definitive yes/no response is accepted for each item. And then it was able to remove such cases. And then this is the final evaluation prompt that we generated. So here's a case scenario, sentences are numbered, and also we added this part to specifically construct a response in this tabular format. So Sour 7 item response yes, no, and score of X, meaning the score should go here, sentence numbers and reasoning, and the total scores should be added at the bottom row of the table. So this is me giving a precise instruction on how the results should be displayed. And also, I'm specifying how the next step should be provided by the ChatGPT. We didn't want AI model to add any of their own explanation, but strictly follow the original assessment guide on what it suggests, what the original Sour 7 questionnaire suggests to do when the results are positive or not. So if the total score is less than 4, suggests less likelihood of delirium. In this case, no follow-up actions needed to be suggested. If the score between 4 and 5 indicate possible delirium, and suggested course of action is to evaluate potential medical causes, meds, or substances. This is all strictly just following the original assessment because we wanted to closely model that with AI. And then if the score is 9 or higher, indicates delirium, this warrants immediate medical evaluation. Also, this is the language used in the original assessment. And we're also adding this part. Do not provide any further recommendations beyond this scope, because we also noticed some cases where ChatGPT was adding its own suggestions or recommendation. And we wanted to first remove that to see if it can strictly follow the way that the original assessment is done. So all that is done and we evaluate it. And this is like the example of the response. So you can see that it is actually able to generate the response based on the precise description that was given. And then scoring interpretation and the suggested next steps also is following the description that we provided. Same thing with the ChatGPT 4. It's giving the sentence numbers that it generated and so forth. So with that, when we compare this to human experts' result, I don't know how clearly you can see this, but overall, ChatGPT can actually, ChatGPT's result were very comparable. It was pretty comparable to the human experts across 5 trials that we ran. So we didn't just do it one time. We actually did this testing 5 times with each models. And you can see the difference between the human experts and the ChatGPT model is close. And the result of the result of possible delirium and or not, that result was exactly same. But there were some changes. There were some fluctuations of the scoring, whether the score was 12 or 13, but still it was above the 9 threshold of correctly diagnosing or correctly assessing, correctly screening potential delirium. As you can see, there were some variations between human experts as well. So not all human experts were able to score the assessment with the same number. So for example, we see the range of like 12 to 17 across these 5 human experts as well. So we see the range of ChatGPT across the 5 trials actually not generating the same result all the time, but it's actually giving a little bit of variation. And when we further dive into the sentence reasoning, it was very close, but there were some cases where ChatGPT were drawing from sentences where none of the human evaluators were using to infer, to reason, to create, to assess, give the assessment result. So overall, ChatGPT can effectively learn and apply the standardized clinical assessment tools, through the prompt engineering that we were able to do. Now, our next step is to see how this can be used to support family caregivers by providing them with this type of easy-to-use tool for assessing delirium symptoms at home, so that it can enable timely intervention. And to do this, to aid this work, what we are doing in my department is to build this customized language model. So we're not only just using like open AI's ChatGPT model, but we are actually building our smaller language model that is designed to specifically deal with family caregiving. So we have designed it, we have developed it. This is still ongoing research, but we are taking in specific family caregiver resources like articles from the PubMed, forum discussions, guidelines, like websites like patient family caregiver discussion board. We're mining the data to train our smaller language model to provide more family caregiver specific context to the responses that it can generate. So this next part is our like test agent. I know the text is really small, but one of the improvement that we're making is actually providing the references to the original text. Whenever the AI model is producing a content or the suggestions or recommendations or reading material, it is able to accurately trace back to the resources and the references that it was used to generate that content. So the family caregivers or users can click on to the reference link and actually read it for themselves to see whether this is a valid article or not. So all that is my ongoing research. I know our time is almost up. So just as a wrap up, I really think there is a role for generative AI in providing personalized real-time assistance to especially family caregivers. It can possibly offer some advices, especially also providing emotional support and educational resources. And we're confirming this with our focus groups that we're running and user studies that we're running with our pool of family caregivers. But still, the potential of hallucinations, like inaccurate information, is very real. And the way that we minimize this is to build one, like our smaller language model, being able to train this well so that can be minimized. But still, there are going to be the risks of hallucination in using this AI device, AI tools, and that's something further discussion of how to provide the protection, and also involving the experts in the mix of this to produce a recommendation that is also vetted and that is accurate, not leading family caregivers into astray. So we are continuing to build this fine-tuned model, language model, caregiver language model in our department. And hopefully our goal is to continue to make the AI tool more reliable and effective, especially on the family caregiving context. So thank you very much. And I am open to your questions and future connection.
Dr. Choi, that was just an amazing presentation. It's so fascinating, especially from someone like me that has very limited technology experience, but so potentially impactful. And I really value your overarching goals and purpose for doing this work, to support care partners as well as to promote aging in place and providing resources for care partners and people like those that are living with dementia and individuals as they age. So So thank you for doing this amazing work. I also appreciate that when you shared a lot of the information, including, explaining the large language model, that you shared it in the simplest of sense. Again, for people like me, that, it was very clear and understandable. And I really appreciate that. Gave some great links for us to explore. As an educator, I'm very curious to play around with this to create some instructional strategies. I think that's super cool. And what you're doing in relation to delirium research is incredibly impressive. And it was so helpful to see that kind of step-by-step process and how you just kept taking it, to another level to enhance the work. So thank you for sharing all of that. Dr. Donovic was not able, she was on the call today, but she's not able to unmute. But I did want you to know that she was present and she thanks you for your presentation. It was a great overview, and also you shared very specific uses. Nahida is mentioning a great presentation specifically in this technology-driven era. Nahida, do you want to unmute and share your question aloud?
Yeah, sure. Great presentation, Dr. Choi, because I feel like as a student, it's a great platform to get some understanding idea from ChatGPT. So I just have a kind of like very general type of question to you. So it's like I found sometimes that whatever references or citations ChatGPT provides not always exist, So when I'm kind trying to go back and find that article or something, I don't, find that. So do you have any suggestion for that?
Yes, so that is a very real problem, especially if you're trying to use this for the studying purposes. The way that it generates sometimes the citations is a fake citation. That's also an example of hallucination. And there are some more specific AI tools that's used for academic, let's say academic writing, and also academic searching. So it is able to accurately process like the database like PubMed. So I wouldn't suggest using like ChatGPT or general purpose language model yet for like academic studies, because it does have the risk of falsifying the citation. I have seen personally, as I'm a teacher as well, some of the work submitted by students sometimes it has this ChatGPT generated false citation. I have to take action to that. And those are the era that we live in now as an educator.
Thank you. We do have our hand raised by another one of our PhD students, Joni Scott. Let's see, Joni, if you would like to unmute and ask your question.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Choi, great presentation, very informative. I do have a question. I noticed that in order to assess a patient's mental orientation, date and time, you noted that it would be hallucination for an incorrect response. Could you please elaborate on that? Like I see that you use the word hallucination, the symptoms throughout.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that can be confusing, especially in the dementia and delirium researcher, because hallucination is a word that's used to describe clinical symptoms. But the way that I use hallucination was actually a term that we use in the AI space as well. So with the generative AI, when the AI is hallucinating, it's creating information that seems plausible, but it's actually a false information. So that was the term hallucination that's very well used in the AI space. So the goal in the AI community is to reduce hallucination as much as possible to generate the accurate content. Now, in terms of the part that I presented was about like SOUR 7 assessment questionnaire. When I asked ChatGPT on this specific assessment tool, it was giving me what is the date and time, what is and like 7 questions related to that, but that's actually not a SOUR 7 questionnaire item. So it seems like it is maybe a correct way to maybe assess cognition or delirium symptoms, maybe even, but it's not actually answering the question that I have asked. So it's not generating the SOUR 7 items, but it's just generating something that on the 7 question format that is plausible, but it's actually not what I'm looking for.
Okay, and you would define that as hallucination based
That
on
is hallucination. That is a case of hallucination where is what we want is if AI doesn't know exact way that it should answer, it should say, oh, I do not have information on this SOUR 7 questionnaire items. And it should not generate anything more than that. If it's generating additional, like plausible looking like sentences, then non-domain experts like family caregivers, lay persons might just think that is the right one, but that's the dangerous case that might lead to how that can be misused.
Okay, thank you.
Sure,
Yeah.
thank you.
So I loved your phrase when you were talking about prompt engineering. You were saying what you get back depends on how you ask it.
Yes.
That's so critical. And I've experienced that with Alexa, for example,
Yes.
asking questions and then getting something very strange back. So I appreciate you recognizing or sharing that with us and giving us some resources related to that. Janet is asking, can you address caregiver health literacy using ChatGPT?
Yes, thank you for this question. So, in one of my other work is actually really trying to understand the perspective of layperson users, older adults, and also older family caregivers who are usually taking care of their partners or other family members with dementia or other type of chronic conditions. So, when I ask them, I ask, have you heard about AI tools, or are there some generative AI solutions that you have used, like ChatGPT? And these are some of the focus group questions that we have. I mean, there are older family caregivers who have heard about this technology. They might have tried it once, couple times also, and now some are also mentioning when they search on Google, which what they usually do, they now see like AI responses up on top. So they also see how search is changing with this. Now they are like when I say they, it's still in the general sense, but those people that I talk to in our focus groups, they are aware of this technology, but they still have not much trust in it, like how they would just use Google and they would just go through the search result and then select the one that they think is relevant, like WebMD or like NIH or more source, like reputable sources that they know. They want to choose that link so that they know that this information is correct rather than like ChatGPT creating an output. Now, that's why we are working on that references so that they can click on that references to know exactly where that information is coming from. Now, in terms of the health literacy wise, generative AI, one of the ways that we can use generative AI is to rewrite the content, now matching to the literacy level of the user. So we can provide a more specific prompt to write the content in, let's say, 6th grade reading level, or in a specific language, the health literacy level that you might want to target. So those are some strategies that you can actually introduce when you are generating content with AI.
Thank you for sharing that. And Dr. Choi, I don't know if you're able to see the chat, but there's all kinds of positive remarks related to the presentation. Great presentation, very informative. Thank you. Excellent presentation and excellent work. So on that note, I'm afraid we have to end for today, but we hope to have you come again sometime and share how your work has progressed. But this is fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. And just a reminder to folks to complete the post-event evaluation form. which will pop up in your browser when the seminar ends, or you'll receive it via email within 24 hours. So thank you again, Dr. Choi. It was a pleasure to have you, and thanks everyone for coming.